All right, hello and welcome to everybody who is getting joined in. Glad to see you all here today and glad that you're joining us for a conversation around crankcase ventilation. And as you can see on the screen, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about, briefly, what does it do? How does it fail? And we'll start with who's the customer for crankcase ventilation. Now, before we get into that, though, let's move forward just one slide and remind you we do have one more call for the year coming up in December around door lock actuators. And, I've had people ask me, well, why would I care about door lock actuators? Well, you'll be surprised at how many other categories tie in with door lock actuators and how much technology has evolved with door lock actuators to the point now where, you know, BWD is going to be able to go out and have a conversation, right? You're going to be able to take that box, that brand, that logo, and show that customer that you have everything available when it comes to some of these newer technologies and some of these door lock actuator issues that are out there in the market. So don't sleep on this one. Don't forget to do the door lock actuator call, what's coming up in December. You see the link there. If you've got a chance, just take a picture of it with your phone and you'll be able to go and register for that call coming up on the 9th of December. But again, our conversation today is around crankcase ventilation. What does it do? Why does it fail? And what are some conversation starters? Well, let's start with that piece of it, the conversation starters, which is literally every customer that we can go see is going to be involved in crankcase ventilation in one way or another. Unless maybe it is a shop that only works on EV. Probably don't want to have a conversation about crankcase ventilation at a Tesla dealership, but if it's a shop that works on hybrids or gasoline engines or diesel engines, crankcase ventilation is a topic that they're dealing with already, and it's something we can talk about with them and show them the breadth of coverage that we have. And this includes even collision centers. There's a lot of these crankcase ventilation parts, especially the plastic hoses, some of the engine oil separators, some of the different apparatuses that go with it that can be basically damaged in a front end collision. So collision centers are using these components as well. So when we say conversation starters, we have everyone out there we can go talk to about crankcase ventilation, and we have a lot of good things to talk about when it comes to it. And that's where the BWD program is going to come into play. Jesse's going to go over some of the, more common things that we can be talking about and some of the newer things that are in the line to kind of keep you out there having conversations about it. He'll go over the competitive landscape. I think you'll be happy to see what that looks like. And then we're going to wrap up with Mr. Aaron Schaefer, who's going to give us some information around sales support and, really what we're doing behind the scenes to, support you when you're having these conversations with all these different types of shops. So again, real high level here, what does crankcase ventilation do? Well, it's very simple. It's got a simple purpose, which is removing those blow-by gases, rerouting them from the crankcase itself through the PCV valve and back into the intake manifold so that we can then get them in the combustion chamber and dispose of them properly. And what I mean by blow-by gas is it doesn't matter. Again, if it's an ICE engine or a hybrid engine or a diesel engine, there's going to be blow-by gases that work their way past the piston ring and in different places. And we don't want that muddying up the oil in the crankcase because there's going to be contaminants, there can be fuel, there can be all kinds of debris that gets in there, and that's going to degrade the oil. So we want those vapors, any water vapor, fuel vapor, or any mist of any kind that could have debris to be rerouted and thrown back into the combustion chamber so we can get rid of them. We don't want it clouding up our oil. So that's really what they do. Now, it can be anywhere between 2, 5, 10, or 20 components, depending on the vehicle that we're talking about, on how many components are required for crankcase on a specific vehicle. But regardless of how many components there are or which way they are tied together, the whole point is just to reroute those blow-by gases. So, in the early days, it was just a PCV valve and a hose, but obviously we have evolved. One of the reasons we have evolved is because of the different evolutions in the motors that we're working on. So we have motors now, 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, where, upwards of half the vehicles on the road coming on, off the market today are going to have some form of a turbocharger or possibly gasoline direct injection, GDI, or a combination of both GDI and turbochargers. Now remember, we want to keep those blow-by gases out of the crankcase so that we have good, fresh, clean oil. And that's going to be imperative for things like turbochargers. We want to make sure our turbochargers are lubricated properly. If we muddy up the oil, we're going to make it very easy to cause damage to the turbocharger. And then the same thing with the GDI injectors. Unlike multi-port fuel injectors that, mix with the air and then come into the combustion chamber through the valve, those will help clean the valves. Well, in GDI, we don't have that. GDI is going, getting straight directed into the combustion chamber. It's not mixing first. So we already have issues with GDI injectors building up carbon, which is a bad thing. And by having blow-by gases not being rerouted properly and mist and vapors coming through the intake system, that makes it even quicker and more susceptible for the GDI injectors to get carbon buildup. So again, rerouting those blow-by gases so that they don't end up into the intake and mess up our GDI injectors or cloud up our oil. That's what we're trying to do. We want fresh, clean air coming into the crankcase. No oil, no, I'm sorry, no mist of vapors or no fuel mist or anything like that. We want the oil clean. We want clean air coming in. And so one of the adaptations or evolutions has been engine oil separators. So not only do we have PCV valves and hoses for those kinds of things, we also now have engine oil separators that have been widely adopted by most manufacturers. I mean, even back into the early, say 2010s, 2012, 2013, we've had these engine oil separators on vehicles since as early as that. So what these are going to do is make sure that the oil getting back to the crankcase has those vapors pulled out, has those mist pulled out. There's fuel mist, water mist, or any debris. It's going to pull that out before it sends the oil back to the crankcase. And that's what we want. And that's why we see a wide adoption of these because, again, we have GDI vehicles, we have turbocharged vehicles, and we have a lot more opportunity for fuel vapors and water vapors to work their way in. So engine oil separators are a huge category now that's growing and going to continue to grow in the coming years to assist with that crankcase ventilation. Again, we want our oil clean. We want it, being able to lubricate the moving components. And unless we get those vapors out, we're going to see oil get degraded very quickly. And that brings us to why crankcase ventilation components fail. Primarily, it's going to be because of poor maintenance. So if we're using the correct oils, we're using, the right weight, the right intervals when we're supposed to get it done, the right amount, we should be okay. But we all know that maintenance is the biggest problem we have with vehicles on the road today, and that's what will cause crankcase ventilation components to fail. We can have sludge and carbon buildup, we can get valves sticking open or closed, and we can have fatigue in the seals. They can deteriorate as a result of poor maintenance and just time also. You have to remember these crankcase ventilation components, whether it's the PCV valve, a breather filter, a hose, whatever the case is, these are fail components, meaning they are going to fail at some point. And in fact, most of them have specific service intervals where they're supposed to be replaced anyway, just like an air filter or a cabin air filter. That doesn't get done very often, as much as it should. So when that happens, we can create too much pressure in the system. We can get blockages. We can get fatigue in the system itself. And that's going to do things that can be very detrimental to the engine. It can blow out rear main seals. It can blow out oil pan gaskets. There's a lot of different sealing pieces of the motor that can be, badly affected by a crankcase ventilation system that is clogged or even just, narrowly passaged because of buildup and debris. So maintenance is key when it comes to crankcase ventilation. And that, again, I said it already, making sure we use the right oil, the right amount of oil, and we do it at the right intervals. Now, one thing that we've got on the bottom here, do not overfill the crankcase. It's very important. Remember, we have these engine oil separators now, and what we don't want to do is suck oil into the intake, right? And an easy way for that to happen, regardless of whether the crankcase ventilation system is working properly or not, is overfilling the oil reserve, right? So if it says 4.25 quarts and we put in 5, we're giving it almost a quart of oil too much. It's going to make it very easy to pull oil into the intake. We don't want that. So make sure we use the right amount, the right weight and specifications. And we do them at the right times. If we do that, we can extend the life of our crankcase ventilation parts, and we can extend the life of the motor. But remember, even if we do our maintenance on time, these are eventually fail items. So really, by doing our maintenance right, we're just getting the full life capacity out of the components. That way, whenever they're replaced, maybe it's only one or two times throughout the lifespan of a 300 or 400,000 mile car. If we're not doing it on time, we're not replacing those components and we're not doing our maintenance, it's going to cause a lot of issues down the road, and that's what we don't want to see happen. So again, it comes down to maintenance, and it comes down to just doing it the right way with the right oil at the right time. And then, one last little conversation starter I would, recommend is this. I've talked about it in this sense many ways on many different categories. We don't sell batteries, but I can tell you that almost every salesperson I've worked with out in the field has some type of battery program. And one of the ways that we, see them promote the battery program is this. Hey, make sure you're testing every customer's battery, especially near wintertime, to give them a heads up. Hey, your battery's great. You're going to be great during wintertime. Or hey, your battery's pretty weak. You might want to think about getting one before wintertime. That's helping the motorist be ready to drive regardless of the weather or the conditions outside. Well, the same thing holds true on crankcase ventilation. We don't do tune-ups anymore. Tune-up is just unheard of. There's really no full type of tune-up that can be done, but there are preventative maintenance things that should be done that our motorists just don't know about anymore, right? It's not spark plugs and wires like it used to be. There are some specific things that have to be done maintenance-wise to make sure our motorists have cars running the way they should be for as long as they possibly can be. And this is one conversation starter we can have with technicians and saying, hey, when you do your preventative maintenance checklist, are you considering things like PCV valves? Are you considering things like breather filters? Because those are one, stocking items, high volume items, meaning they're going to be replaced a lot, especially with higher mileage vehicles coming in. It's a great way for a technician or a service writer to not only increase their revenue and their business, but give their customers even more peace of mind and the moments they may need it the most. So, great conversation started there. Make sure we're asking if that's part of a preventative maintenance checklist. They can always just go on All Data or whatever program they use, find out what the interval is, and make those recommendations at the time of service, especially when they're already working on something under the hood. And then my last little piece here, and I think one of the best conversation starters, like I say, there's not a customer you can't talk to about this. Collision, general repair, your ICE engine shops, your hybrid engine shops. But I will say, if you want an easy conversation to start with, go into your fleets and municipalities. They're going to have a lot of 6.7 Power Strokes and a lot of 6.7 Cummins vehicles, and those absolutely are critical to replace breather filters on very frequently. And it says ram 100,000 miles or so. Here's the reality. If it's a hot shot vehicle, a ram that's going back and forth coast to coast all the time, that could be done 2 or 3 times in a year span or over a couple years span. And if those breather filters are not replaced, and Jesse's going to go over those here in a minute, that can cause a lot of extra pressure in the system. And again, blow those rear main seals out and oil pan gaskets. And it's the exact same thing on the 6.7 Power Stroke. So if you have a fleet shop or a municipality that you have a good relationship with, they need to know that you have these crankcase ventilation parts and especially these breather filters that Jesse's going to go over here in just a few minutes. So with that, Jesse, I'm gonna send it over to you. I know you've got some great things they're gonna talk to them about and give them some really good insight on how they can start these conversations and what the program looks like through BWD. So the show is yours, sir.
All right. Thanks, Corey. Great stuff as always. Well, now that we've covered the basics of crankcase ventilation systems, let's talk about BWD's program and product offering. Now, based on what Corey's already told you, it should be obvious just how important these components are to how a vehicle functions and performs. So, what should you look for in a crankcase ventilation program? Well, first, you want all the related parts that every vehicle needs for a complete repair. Remember, these are systems, and your supplier should have all the parts needed to service the entire system, not just part of it. You also want parts that have been tested, not just in the lab, but on actual vehicles as well. Now, there's around 285 million vehicles on the road today using an internal combustion engine, and they're not going away anytime soon, which means neither is the need for top quality replacement PCV valves, breather hoses and filters, and engine oil separators. That's why BWD continues to offer the most complete and up-to-date crankcase ventilation program in the aftermarket. We offer nearly 600 different components with industry-leading coverage, so your customers won't miss any sales. While PCV valves are still the norm for most vehicles, the crankcase ventilation world has grown to include more complex solutions such as engine oil separators. And to that end, BWD is at the forefront when it comes to serving today's needs while looking ahead for emerging new technology that'll lead to consistent repair opportunities. So let's take a closer look at some of the key components in BWD's crankcase ventilation program. Crankcase ventilation filters, also known as breather filters, are another common maintenance or tune-up item, particularly in medium and heavy-duty diesel applications. Now, these filters do just what the name suggests. They filter the air coming from and going to the crankcase, keeping contaminants from getting to the intake. Now, the EC247 shown on your screen fits over 2 million Ram trucks with the Cummins 6.7. This very popular filter is also available as a six-pack EC247 PK6, providing a ton of value to fleet customers. So let's talk about engine oil separators. Now, as Corey explained earlier, these are designed to prevent oil from getting into places it shouldn't be, like the intake system. This helps keep the engine clean, improves performance, and ensures that only clean air goes back into the engine for combustion. There are a handful of different designs across vehicle makes, but they all serve the same purpose. And BWD's engine oil separator line has grown a bit in recent years, covering over 38 million vehicles. And the EOS 115 shown on your screen combines an OE-matched hose connector with foam-insulated breather hose to protect against heat damage that could cause leaks, leading to poor vehicle performance. Now, this design, like several others you might find in the BWD line, also includes an integrated PCV valve. So oftentimes, when you replace the engine oil separator, you're also replacing a PCV valve. Now let's turn to crankcase breather hoses, another vital component in a lot of modern crankcase ventilation systems. These hoses provide a passageway for gas vapor to return to the intake system so they can be burnt again. So where does BWD come in? Well, a hose can fail due to cracking or splitting caused by extreme heat, exposure to engine fluid, as well as clogging due to carbon buildup or other contaminants, which is a concern for nearly all crankcase ventilation components, really. A good example here is PCV 768, which not only includes OE-matched hose connectors and protective sleeve, but also the pressure sensor necessary for the proper function of the vehicle's entire crankcase ventilation system. And just like our other crankcase ventilation components, BWD's crankcase breather hose offering has grown to meet demand, currently covering over 129 million vehicles on the road. BWD PCV valves have been trusted by techs and DIYers for decades, with coverage that stretches all the way back to the 1957 model year, believe it or not. And if you've ever sold tune-ups while working the counter, you know that our PCV valves have been the go-to for a long time. And that's because of BWD's commitment to making an aftermarket replacement that doesn't overlook the details. A good example of that attention to detail is the PCV 533, where we don't just have the O-ring and electric heating element. What we have are talented engineers who work to ensure that this O-ring and this heating element meet or exceed OE specifications. We also have the manufacturing capability to turn our engineers' work into the part you'll find in that little box. Of course, we offer hundreds of other PCV valves covering nearly every vehicle on the road today. Now let's take a look at how BWD's Crankcase Ventilation Program measures up to the competition. Now, as you can see, our closest competition is no match for BWD's comprehensive coverage. Now, this is especially true of newer technology components, such as crankcase breather hoses and engine oil separators. So, as I'm always proud to say, advantage BWD. Now, here's a few of the more recent additions to BWD's crankcase ventilation line. Now, I hate to pick on Ford here, but we introduced these parts based on higher than average repair and replacement rates. We've got the PCV 994 crankcase breather hose covering over 1 million vehicles, including the last gen Ford Escape. Another hose with growing demand is the PCV 985, which includes a pre-installed pressure sensor, matching the OE specs. This hose fits nearly 1 million Ford vehicles, such as the Explorer. Finally, there's the EOS 158 engine oil separator, which fits over 1.1 million Fords, including the popular Bronco Sport. Now that you've seen what's new, let's take a look at the crankcase ventilation parts we've launched in the past couple of years that are seeing rapid growth, the up-and-coming parts. Here you'll see everything from engine oil separators covering over 1.6 million Ford diesel trucks to PCV valves for over 1 million Hyundais and Kias. The bottom line is, if you want to grow your crankcase ventilation business, we strongly suggest that you have these 9 components in stock today. Now, PCV valves have been sold as maintenance items for years, but in addition to these, we now have another and more costly and complex maintenance item that is part of the crankcase ventilation system, engine oil separators. Now, it's important to keep in mind that these components usually have recommended service intervals and should be suggested to anyone with these vehicles or engines with higher mileage, especially if they're already working under the hood. Now, I want to take a moment to highlight a key component of the BWD product development process that I touched upon earlier: product testing. Now, due to extreme temperatures, water, chemicals, dirt, and road salt contamination, the underhood environment is, of course, extremely hard on auto parts. That's why BWD manufactured crankcase ventilation products undergo thorough testing and product validation, including extensive performance benchmarking, product lifecycle testing, and end-of-line testing. But the work doesn't always stop there, because many of our crankcase ventilation products undergo live on-vehicle testing at our Texas facility. And finally, I just want to remind everyone that in addition to our comprehensive crankcase ventilation offering, BWD has complete programs in other popular and essential emission control categories. Our EVAP, EGR, and diesel emissions programs continue to offer the components and coverage needed to service most of the vehicles on the road today, along with the often overlooked related parts. Now, this adds up to a heck of a lot of SKUs in full lines that you can sell. So, between these and all the crankcase ventilation parts that BWD has to offer, you'll be hard pressed to find a more complete overall emission control offering. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I'll turn things over now to marketing services to hear about what's new this month in BWD marketing and sales support.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Jesse. Yeah, I think these guys did a really nice job going over the program, how robust and deep the coverage is, as well as some of the benefits of the product and some good opportunities to help increase sales. The last thing I want to do is just present some of the materials that we've created that are available to you to really just help support you, give you the confidence you need to be able to recommend these parts and explain some of the benefits to your service provider customers. So you'll see we have a complete brochure that details the entire mission control program, crankcase ventilation, as well as some of the other categories, as well as simple flyers that are available. And then we've spent years building out the BWD YouTube channel, where we now have over 500 different technical and installation videos that are available to you, as well as you can obviously send links to do-it-yourselfers, service provider customers, anyone that you think would benefit from hearing some of the messages. And then lastly, just to wrap this things up, as far as really what's in the BWD box, it's products that have been rigorously and extensively tested for on-vehicle performance and durability, both in the lab as well as on real vehicles, to make sure that they're integrating within the system correctly, to keep that crankcase ventilation system operating correctly, making sure on these newer GDI engines, it's more and more critical than ever. We also do offer some of the related and the hard to find parts that competitors don't, to put you in a position to be able to say yes and round out more sales. And then lastly, sales support and training materials such as this, as well as the printed materials to help you and to help communicate with your customers. So that's really what we have for you today, and I thank you very much for taking the time out of your day and tuning in.
Yeah, and I'll second that, Aaron. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Aaron and Jesse, for jumping in here and helping me out, and showing what this program's all about and what they can expect, and some conversations they can have with their technicians out there today. So with that, again, everyone, thank you, and we hope to see you next month when we talk about door lock actuators. Again, don't sleep on that one. I think it's going to be a good call that you'll get a lot out of. So with that, everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next month.